That's shocking. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. On this episode we're probably going to try and get the rest of the gauge installed done. Currently I'm just on the way home from work. It's a Saturday and I don't like spending my Saturdays working, but yeah, it is what it is. So about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, so I've got a few hours to spare, so I'll try and chip away at the install. I've got to go back to work later tonight anyway, so it's probably not going to be a hell of a lot of progress, but we'll do what we can. So basically I want to try and get the gauges all wired in, get the wideband sensor all reading nicely and everything. I have to pull part of the exhaust off to weld in the bung for the wideband sensor. Hopefully the weather stays reasonable. At the moment it's been raining this morning. We've sort of just had a bit of a break in the weather now, so yeah, hopefully we'll be able to get some progress done on the car today. If not, maybe tomorrow or maybe even next weekend. We'll get stuck in when we get back home and yeah, see how we go. Okay, so I've just laid out this wideband kit on my workbench. So obviously that's the wideband sensor there. So the wideband sensor, that needs to go into the exhaust somewhere, which is why they've supplied this little threaded bung. So I'm going to have to pull part of the exhaust off, weld this bung into it, obviously drill a hole through the exhaust pipe so that the sensor can protrude into the exhaust stream. This connector here will plug into this connector on this loom. This loom needs to be routed through into the car, at which point you've got this other loom connector here which plugs into the back of the wideband gauge, and then you have another loom here which basically supplies the power to the gauge. So as far as I can tell, the only wires I actually need to connect up to anything to actually provide this thing with power is this red one, which is your ignition power source, and this black one here which is your earth. So that sort of makes the rest of these wires redundant. The only reason I say redundant is because these are pretty much used for like external devices, such as like a data logger or something like that usually. So they're just like your other inputs, I guess, or outputs, depending which way you look at it. So yeah, this should be fairly easy to hook up. So we've got this thing out, and I've just taped the pillar mount to the A pillar. I gave up with forming this thing perfectly. It's actually not too far off, to be honest. It's a lot closer than what it was initially. It has got a bit of a gap there, but it's, yeah, if I try and sort of form that down anymore, it seems to distort the pocket where the gauges sit. So I've basically called it quits there. From the driver's seat, you're probably not going to notice much of that. You only sort of see the gap if you're looking for it when you get to open the door, but yeah, it looks a bit hoary, but it's functional. guys, so that's the pillar mount gauge pod thing. Actually doesn't look too bad. There is a little bit of a gap under there. Obviously you've got the mounting screws that are sort of sticking up a little bit, but I didn't really have much material there to counterbore them and recess the screw heads a bit, so yeah, they sort of stick out a little bit, and I've scratched it there as well. But yeah, all in all, not too bad. It did have a bit of a gap under this side here. I've just filled it with a bit of foam tape, and then I've screwed the mounts down so it sort of compresses it, but yeah, actually doesn't look too bad. Alright, in terms of that A-pillar trim as well, probably saw in the last video when I was trying to pull that out, it's actually a prick of a thing because it sort of wedges itself underneath the dash. This is an absolute nightmare of a job. I don't really want to loosen the dash off to get this thing out, so I'm just trying to twist. Oh, there we go. Just trying to twist it out. I don't really like to touch anything relative to the dash because it's such a pain in the ass to work with, so I've trimmed what I can to make this thing sort of just drop in quite easily, but it still tucks in under the dash and around the inside cowl panel. So yeah, that's basically how the gauges sit right now. Obviously this is not actually mounted properly all the way, but right now that's just sitting in place. So yeah, it's not too bad. I'm not too sure whether this is going to be legal in terms of passing the warrant of fitness checks and that sort of thing, whether they're going to class that as a obstruction of view or whatever. So don't really care at this point. Basically what I was looking at doing, if I had to get it past a warrant of fitness check, is just basically rip this trim out and put another one in there, and then I can just disconnect the looms and whatnot and just leave them sitting. So yeah, all in all, pretty happy with that positioning. So yeah, obviously I've got to remove the gauge to run the wires through here. For the vacuum gauge, that one there will just, yeah, I'll just have that vacuum line run along down here across the dash. I'll probably put a little hole in somewhere over here and route it under the wiper cowl panel and through into the engine bay. I think that's what I did with my boost gauge in my turbo EF, so yeah, I'll probably do the same thing with that. In terms of the wiring for power and yeah, earth, the ground, I'm probably just going to pick up on I don't know exactly, I think that's a ground for the dash loom, I think. Not 100% sure. I've never actually pulled a loom out of these before, but yeah, I'm thinking I could probably use that as your ground for both the gauges, and then for the ignition source, or the 12 volt, I'll probably just either tap into something down here in the fuse box, or yeah, basically just run it through the dash into the cigarette lighter. So yeah. Alright guys, haven't managed to get much done today or this weekend at all. Pretty much been too busy with work. At the moment we're going to go and jack this up. I want to try and figure out where the wideband sensor is best positioned on this exhaust at the moment. It's going to be a little bit tricky. Obviously it's running pacemaker 4499 headers. They run the factory oxygen sensor in the collector just before the flange. I've conveniently welded a bullet resonator directly after the header flange, so yeah, it should be interesting to see where I can actually put this wideband sensor. I'm thinking I might have to put it after the resonator, otherwise I'm going to have to change the exhaust a bit, which I'm not really too keen to do right now. So we'll mark out the hole, drill the hole, and then we'll get this little bung welded on, and hopefully it's in the right spot. This is the exhaust I'm currently running. So like I was saying earlier, I've got the pacemaker 4499 tri-wire headers. I did weld in this straight through bullet resonator, 2.5 inch piping all the way to a 2-chamber Flowmaster style muffler, then just goes up and over the diff. So yeah, basically, considering that sensor is fairly long, and also considering the fact that that sensor does need to sit on somewhat of an angle, I'm thinking somewhere right around here would probably be best. At least that way it's got enough room to slip in and out. And I also need to have it on sort of just past being parallel, so it's sort of like on an upward angle, just so condensation and that sort of stuff doesn't affect the sensor. Yeah, I think I'm just going to have to go with something around this area. So then what I can do is route the loom just out to the side to follow the chassis rail, sort of follow up around there, just up by the steering arm, and then yeah, I'll see if I can route it up behind the little panel just where the gas strut mounts, the bonnet gas strut is. Up behind that panel is a little grommet for some of the looms that go through the firewall. So yeah, I'm sort of thinking about here-ish. So just mark out a bit of a hole. Can't even get the bloody pen in there, but sort of aim for around there, I think. And if that doesn't work out, I guess I'm gonna have to make a replacement straight pipe for this. Alright, so this is my disaster piece of a resonator catalytic converter replacement thing. So it's virtually straight through with a very ugly looking bend, but that's what was needed to get it to mate up to the rest of the exhaust. So yeah, like I was saying, obviously that's the bottom side where it's all flat. I've just put a marking up on that corner, or sorry, up on that area there. So we'll drill a hole, weld that bung in, and then yeah, that'll be the sensor placement side of things done. So we'll go stick some welds around this thing, and then should be all good to go. So that's the exhaust bolted back up. Not the prettiest, but still functional. So sensors all nice and snug in there. The wiring loom Still got a bit of movement, still nice and free, but follows the chassis rail quite nicely, so it can more or less just hold itself in place. But we will put some tyres in there, put in some new gaskets. That's all nice and solid. Yeah, so basically the plan is to get this to more or less follow the chassis rail from here all along, and then just sort of sweep up there where the firewall is, and then we'll just sort of find a spot in the grommet that goes through the firewall and behind the dash, and then yeah, we'll run the wiring through there, hook it up to this, cable tie it out of the way, and yeah, that's pretty much all there is to it. New day. Basically today we're going to go straight into the wiring side of things. I've already started pulling bits and pieces off the car this morning, so we've got the wiper cowl panel that's off at the moment. I've got to try and run a vacuum hose somewhere off one of these through this section here, and then I will drill a hole from that side through to here, just so I can route the vacuum line from the inside of the cabin to the engine bay. I've also got the wiring loom down there, probably just see it down that area, for the wideband sensor, and I've got to run this through the firewall into the cabin as well. At the moment I'm looking at removing all of this stuff, just so I can get access to the big grommet there is there, or there is a grommet under there somewhere, where some of the loom goes through the firewall into the cabin, so we'll sort that out today as well. We've also got to run the wires for the gauge power, to both of the gauges that is, so we'll sort that out today as well. It's funny, I was actually pulling this wiper cowl off and I thought, shit, this is actually pretty clean under here, there's no rust. Surprise. Boom. So lucky that wiper cowl panel is actually covering this entire area, so before I get stuck into anything I'll grind all of that back, treat it with some rust converter, and yeah, at least stop it rusting further. But yeah, I guess it wouldn't be an E-Series without rust. Yeah, pretty sad, but truth hurts. So. Okay, in terms of the vacuum source for the vacuum gauge, I've got this little T-piece here. I've actually run this off the port down here off the top of the intake manifold that goes to the map sensor. Ideally I don't want to do it that way, but considering that this little vacuum T has a restrictor, and I'll try and zoom in on this so you can see the size of this. There's literally about 1 millimeter diameter in that restrictor, so that's not going to make too much of a difference to the vacuum that's getting through to the map sensor, so I'm happy with that. Basically I've just had a spare upper intake manifold sitting around that I've taken this section off, so it's literally that piece, again just over here. T fits into that. Vacuum line from the gauge that's going to be inside there is going to come through just under the windscreen. There's actually a hole just here which comes through just there, so I'll run the line across, follow these brake lines, and then just sort of loop it under the intake piping, and then yeah, that's pretty much going to be the vacuum source for the gauge. So that little thing under there, that's the loom grommet that I'm planning to slip this wiring in through. Not sure if you can see that properly, but there's a little sort of like a rib in this grommet just to the right. Well, it's basically all around the main section where the loom goes through the center of that grommet, but just on the side here I've just punched the screwdriver through there. And that should give me enough room to actually squeeze this little loom through, so just sort of giving it a couple of goes just to try and open it up a bit. Feed that loom through, and then yeah, we'll basically just tidy up the cable, tie it to a few points just to secure it. What I've done is I've taped a step drill to the loom. I'm going to try and jam that through, and hopefully that opens up the hole big enough to feed the loom through. once it's through and it's on this outer sleeve of the wiring, it should just slide through quite nicely, but just getting it started is a pain in the ass, so hopefully the step drill works. So step drill's somewhere in there at the moment. I think that's the step drill there. Oh, it is, mean. Okay, so I can pull that through. Oh, beautiful. It did actually work. So yeah, wiring's all good. Like I was saying, once it gets in there, it's so easy to pull through now, so that's good. So main wiring from the wideband sensor up into the cabin is all done. Basically just looped it in behind where the bonnet release cable would be. Just run it up the side of the A-pillar, and it sort of just tucks in like right beside the dash. And then that part there just sort of actually slips underneath the dash, so that's quite nice. Once this trim is back in, once this rubber molding seal thing is back in, you can't really tell, so it's pretty cool. What I am planning to do is remove this tweeter. They're not even connected anyway because I run the tweeters in the little triangle pieces on the door trim, so I'll take that out. That'll give me a bit of room to just put the excess cabling up there. I think what I'll do next is I'll pull all of this stuff out. I need to get the wiring, ignition power source from the cigarette lighter, I think, and then I'll just run the wiring up through behind the vents, up along here, and then over to where the gauges will be. So yeah, they shouldn't be too difficult, should be nice and easy. Alright, so I'll tap into the ignition source through the cigarette lighter. I don't smoke, so the cigarette lighter is basically a waste of space in my car. So yeah, I'll tap into that for the ignition source for both of the gauges. The vacuum gauge doesn't really draw much power, and I don't imagine the wideband would draw much power either. I can run the wiring up behind where the head unit is. There's a slight gap. A bit tricky to see, but there's a slight gap just under there, which I can feed up through the top side here, and then just run along through to the A-pillar where the gauge would be. So yeah, we'll do that now. So we've cut this wire. I've routed the wiring in through. There's a little gap in the dash just up here where all the other wiring looms sort of poke through. So I've just gone through that gap down there, sort of just see the wires at the back there. I've had to take out the climate control unit just to route the wire through this side because there's no actual way of getting it through this little vent, and just follow it underneath. What I plan on doing here is probably just running this wire back through this section, and then just come out of the bottom. So yeah, that'll tuck it out of the way. I've got two wires I need to splice into. I've got a illumination wire, or the lighting wire, which is this brown one on this courtesy light thing for the cigarette lighter. Basically the vacuum gauge has got a third wire, so you've got your 12 volt ignition, you've got your ground, and then you've got a 12 volt lighting, so when you turn the headlights on the gauge will dim slightly so it's not as bright at night time. So I'll probably tee into this one as well. Alright, so first little test, just the vacuum gauge at the moment, so it's got power now. If I turn the headlights on, this should dim. Very small amount, but it's still, yeah, so that's pretty much vacuum gauge done. So I haven't bothered to video the whole wiring process because it's a bit tedious. But what I've done here is just join the two 12 volt ignition hookups on the gauges together. So we've got actually 12 volt ignition there. So basically the idea is that I just run the wire from the dash up there through to the A pillar. I'll crimp another female bullet connector onto the wiring up there. I've got this already with a male, so I can clip those together. I've done a female on the ground wire, and I've basically joined those two together as well, so they're all ganged up. Drilled the hole, I've put a little rubber grommet in there just so I can run the vacuum hose through there without it rubbing on the steel. So yeah, I'll just finish up the rest of the wiring for the A pillar. Just drilled a couple of holes down there just to guide the vacuum line and the power cables through. So I just need to run the earth. Yeah, pretty close now. Moment of truth. So gauges are all mounted up now, so it looks pretty decent. It's not too bad. Wiring's pretty much all run, so that's all connected up now. A little bit hard to see because it's about 11:30 at night right now, but yeah, sort of wanted to finish off the wiring at least, and I can tidy up the rest tomorrow morning. So this is the earth, or the ground cable for the gauges, so I haven't actually wired that up just yet. So yeah, just holding that earth down at the moment, but gauges are powered up. I think that's actually heating the sensor up. Usually it heats up the sensor and then it would actually start reading once it's actually got some gas going past the sensor. So right now it should read more or less full lean. Basically reading full lean right now. So alright, so this is the next morning, so we're on to Easter Sunday now. This is taking way too long, but probably better that I spend a little bit more time on it and try and get things tidied up as I'm going, as opposed to doing it all rough and having to go back through and double check and triple check things. So at the moment I got the gauges basically wired up last night. I do still need to run the vacuum hose over from the gauge over to the intake manifold where I've got the little T-piece. So that should be easy enough. In saying that, I think I'm short of hose. This is only just by quickly looking at it last night. It was pitch black, so I couldn't actually tell for sure. Potentially I might need to run a little joiner just to extend it over to the T-piece. Not sure if I have anything. I've got a whole gang of shit in the garage, bits and pieces off different engines, so hopefully I might have something that'll work. So we'll sort that out first. I still need to run the ground cable for the gauges as well. So like I was saying earlier, I think what I'm going to do is ground it off the same point where the dash loom is grounded. They've actually got a nice bolt just up behind the dash before the windscreen. So apart from that, it's basically just tidying up excess cabling and stuff like that. Yeah, so we should be able to get this thing back onto the bass tune side of things this afternoon quite comfortably. I've got a few things on today, so try and knock out most of this morning, and then probably later this afternoon we'll grab the laptop out and start doing some tuning again. So looking forward to that. Really very interested to know what this air fuel ratio actually is right now. Like I was saying, I think it's still way too rich. That's evident by when you give it a rev, there's black smoke everywhere out the back. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what sort of air fuel ratios I'm seeing right now, because I'm gonna say it's probably in the 10s, possibly even the 9-to-1 ratio, which is excessively rich. Around idle it's probably around the 11s, I'd say, at the moment. So yeah, we'll see what it actually reads. Be interesting to see what the actual vacuum reading is at idle as well, because I'm sort of thinking it's around the 15 to 16 inches area. It could be more, could be less, but we'll see. Yeah, so that's pretty much the plan of attack today. So yeah, we'll get stuck into it, I guess. Alright, so you can just see the vacuum hose going through the inside panel just under the windscreen. So that comes out just down there. I've just put a little bit of a bigger rubber hose around it just to protect it around the corners of the steel there. Routed it over the top of the wiper motor. Then it goes through that hole in the cowl panel area. It comes through there, just runs along where the brake lines are. So it follows the brake lines and just comes across where the map sensor is. I did run out of hose, so I've got a little plastic tube off a 5 litre 302 intake manifold that I had laying around. So I've got that just looping underneath, and then that's joining up to the little T-piece that I've put in just off the intake manifold. So that's the vacuum hose side of the vacuum gauge done. So yeah, just slip that in behind the vents under there, so it's all out of the way. Ground cable for the gauges is all mounted up now. So yeah, it's just a case of slipping that cowl panel back in, and that'll hide all my dodgy ass wiring. So it looks pretty good. Test this out. It should go through its heating stage. It's not actually flickering, I think this is just the camera frame rate playing up here, but we'll let that heat up a bit. Okay, so it's reading full lean at the moment. We'll fire it up. Or not. Might be a little bit unhappy because it's had the ECU disconnected when I pulled the battery. The vacuum gauge is reading something. So you can see the AFR's at about 11. That's shocking. So yeah, she's still idling pretty rich at the moment, so sort of like 11s. Hey, can I help you? Excuse me, Gracie. But yeah, it needs a bit of work, so we'll get this car back down on the ground, and this dog will get out of my car. Come on girl, let's go. Alright guys, so that's pretty much a wrap on the gauge install in the Fairmont Ghia. So we've got the air fuel ratio gauge hooked up now with the wideband sensor. We have got a vacuum gauge on here as well. It's yet to be determined whether that's actually reading accurate, but we'll investigate other options and yeah, see if there's a better gauge, or see if there's a confirmation that we can get that this gauge is actually reading correctly, so as in something that I can compare to. So yeah, that brings us to the end of this particular episode. On the next episode, we're definitely getting into some bass tuning. I've already started some bass tuning, but I want to keep that in a separate video because this video is probably going to be excessively long already. So yeah, thanks for watching guys. Hopefully this comes in handy for anyone that wants to do like a gauge install, so it gives you a bit of a rundown on what to expect and that sort of thing. So far, pretty happy with the AEM air fuel ratio gauge kit. It's actually fairly decent quality, not too pricey either, so yeah, definitely recommend that. The vacuum gauge, however, I probably wouldn't recommend that. It's a cheap one, is basically the only one I could find on the day that I went out to try and find one, so yeah, there's definitely better options out there. I basically just got what I got because it was the only thing I could find. So yeah, next episode, definitely getting into some bass tuning. Like I said, I've already started on it, but I want to compile that footage into one video. So yeah, thanks again for watching. Appreciate all the comments, likes and shares, and yeah, subscribers. The channel's actually growing pretty good. Honestly didn't expect it to get anywhere near this far this quickly, so yeah, thanks guys, appreciate it. Yeah, catch you on the next one. Sure.